Trendspotting media tech, looking at the world through a new lens. Big round of applause from Kabir, Kochhar and Umang. Bedi, come to the stage, please. Is social media dead?
Not at all.
No? Favorite social media platform?
The
one you use the most, which might not necessarily be your favorite.
You know, a founder of mine had this thing that he would download and delete the apps on Monday and re-download them on Friday. So I started doing that for the last couple of weeks, and it's working out really well.
Yeah.
Except for today, because I can't do anything about it.
So which one? What's your preferred social media
guilt
trip?
I'm a visual person, so Instagram, and then Reels from that. And I'm just following the path of pretty much every human being, and I'm in it for the dopamine hit, I guess. I'm trying not to, but
yeah.
You know.
Well, I have a recency bias on this one. I used to run Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, and WhatsApp as the CEO in India.
Yeah.
And so I had none of those. My favorite app still remains WhatsApp, fundamentally because it's the highest DAU to MAU ratio, which is daily active users to monthly active users. But other than that, it's my own app, Josh, which is a short video platform for the next billion users.
Yeah. Tell us about it.
So,
for those who don't know.
So, a lot of the questions or observations in the last session, and Upper May as a dear friend from Bangalore, were on a bias around what the world looks like around us. And that bias is driven by language, and a large amount of that bias comes from the English-speaking world. When you think about 8 billion people on planet Earth, and if I just extrapolate it to 1.5 billion people in India, only 200 million speak and understand and communicate in English. Over 1.2 billion speak in over 2,000 languages, right? And so if you were to go to Instagram, and I'll give you two fun anecdotes, which are very interesting to understand human psyche. How many of you have flown in India before? Show of hands, right? How many of you have flown Indigo Airlines before, right? If you notice before the flight starts, the leading lady states that the people in this flight can speak, 5, 6 languages. Why do you think they say that? Shout out. They do in Emirates also. Why do you think they do that? To make it more inclusive. No, so it's not really true. It's commerce. In Indigo, it's a low-cost airline like Southwest. They sell food and beverage. 70% of the sales happen in local languages, right? An interesting insight, my young chauffeur who left actually to come to Dubai sent me a request on a social media platform, and he's 25, and it was LinkedIn. And I was like, dude, what's wrong with you? Why don't you send it to me on Instagram? The whole youngsters are there. And his question to me was, how much do you earn in a month? And I was like, I earn enough. I'm okay. So he said, okay, let's make the assumption you earn $1,000 a month. And I drove you to this hotel to attend a party where there were 100 people, and everyone here earned $1 million a month. How would you feel? And I said, I would feel a little intimidated. I would feel this is not my environment. And he said, that's how I feel on Instagram. Because it's all about fancy food, fancy cars, fancy fashion, fancy travel. There's not enough local content around local context, around local fashion, around local food. And so when we look at the world from that prism, the first lens that we see is there is 1 billion people in India, and when I extrapolate that, to the world, there are over 5 billion people that fall into that bucket, right? And I think there is a need for a medium of expression, both on the creativity side and also on the consumption side. And that is the singular reason why TikTok is kicking Facebook's ass.
Yeah.
Fundamentally because it's built on a content graph and not a social graph. I don't know how many of you remember, but the first time you went onto your favorite social media platform, you registered. And then what it made you do is it said, hey, let me find you some friends. And you know what you did as naive individuals? You shared your phone book. You just gave them your entire data for them to make human connections and give you recommendations. Whereas what TikTok did was nothing. All you did was select a language or not even that. You came into feed, and bases your behavior, implied or unimplied, on how you were consuming content, it started driving personalization in terms of recommendations to you, right? And that's why it's so addictive. And I disagree with a couple of comments made in the room prior to this, because when you look at usage of TikTok versus usage of Facebook or Reels, even Reels, it's chalk and cheese, right? It's Instagram is nowhere in the world where TikTok is, both from a user scale and from a revenue scale perspective, right? So those are a couple of my opening observations.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's define media tech. I think that's a good place to start, because it means many things to many people. I even went on Google, what's media tech? I mean, I couldn't find an answer. You literally cannot find an answer.
Yeah.
So both of you define it and tell us, define the landscape as it is right now. Define the trends, what's happening in the media tech landscape.
So in my capacity as an investor, I look at commerce, right? And when we look at media tech, we see which are the ways you can monetize these things, right? So one is through entertainment, whether that's subscription, so on and so forth, you buy a movie ticket. And the second one is through advertising, which is the underlying layer which powers pretty much most of the current social media platforms. To us, what that means as investors, right? When I look at, so I run a cross-border Indo-US fund in the media tech space. And when we look at India as a consumption, India and the rest of Asia also as a consumption market, we're talking about the creator economy, which is massive. And to talk about the creator economy very briefly, right? At the end of the day, Upper Mayam said something about, you would not consume that person's 3 hours, but no one's asking you to do that. But it's democratizing the access to potential fame and scaling up. If you look at how much time someone spends on social media, a lot of the time is actually look at those influencers, and it's become a new medium of consumption overall. So that's the creator economy. Second is gaming. Whether it's social gaming or whatnot, I mean, gaming as an industry is larger than Hollywood. It's larger than audio. So it's massive. And third is content monetization, scalable content platforms, the hardest thing to build. I have so much respect for Ku and for what he's doing with Josh, because it's very, very difficult to build. So obviously we have a very large consumption audience in India. Of course, the rates monetizable way through advertising is a little bit low, but there are other ways to find ways to get to the wallet and expanding the base. The second thing, which we look at media tech, is B2B. Well, and when we look at B2B, we look at companies in Asia scaling up for the world. And this is a common thing you're hearing, right? SaaS companies, India, scaling up globally, trying to take advantage of the cost arbitrage and so on and so forth. But there are industries like ad tech, martech, the underlying nuts and bolts on which media runs. And a lot of people have not looked at that carefully with a magnifying lens for a very long time. So there's so many opportunity. And then there's this whole thing about information asymmetry, right? Like, because of my background in media technology and our team and other people, there is a certain amount of information asymmetry which you can use and scale up. So for instance, if a company has, on an Indian cost base, has an enterprise client paying, 10, let's say, $1 million rupees, now that could translate into maybe, $1 million also when they do the same thing in the US, if provided they know how to sell and monetize in the US. And that's what our job is, to help them do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll kind of dumb it down. I like to do these things. So media tech is just, I think it's Manoj's framing. The way I look at it is traditional media and digital media. Traditional media is being disintermediated very, very quickly. You're seeing that moreover in the West. Newspapers are changing their revenue models because print circulation is down. Costs are up, EBITDAs are hurt. And television all around the world is kind of moving to cord cutting, and we kind of know that, right? Now, the hard part is when you bring in the tech part of the whole piece is it's moving online onto some platform. That platform was, till 10 years ago, a desktop. Then it moved to a laptop. At this end of the world, it moved to mobile, right? Because it kind of became the lowest common denominator in terms of where content consumption was driven. And then the hardest part on that platform, and you can talk to all traditional businesses that have tried to pivot in that business, is how do you find the money, right? Because if you want to be a New York Times and you want to build a subscription business, it needs a complete differentiation in the newsroom. Your newsroom needs to move from news to analysis, to very deep insight. That's when people will pay for that content. Otherwise, news is just a commodity, right? And so very few companies around the world have been able to make that shift, which is why it is still not a great business model today in terms of subscription. So that's one model. The second model is advertising. But when you think about advertising around the world, of the $500 billion spent on ads, today digital is dominant, and Google and Facebook are dominant within it, right? And so I don't want to go there, but if there's any startup in this room, they know the tax that they need to pay on digital colonization, if I could use that word, around growth, which is, I don't want to get into the details, but for several reasons, everything about what you're doing is tracked, whether it's on maps, whether it's on APIs, whether it's on apps that are sharing information with each other. And then comes the third model, which is, okay, so if I can't do ads and I can't do subscription, then what do I do, right? And that's the new buzzword is commerce. And so I can tell you that content companies around the world take the platforms like ours. We're talking about commerce, and commerce platforms are talking about content. No one's got it right? But I think the one piece that we're beginning to see, to the point that Kabir made, is this whole piece around the creator economy. We're seeing around the world, in India alone, it's over $1 billion market. And when I think about how big it is globally, there are influencers that have built billion-dollar companies, right? With over $1 billion in revenue, forget valuation, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that is really real, and it's beginning to play out. Now, these tiers of influencers will be very, very different. And there's going to be a proliferation in my mind of 3 or 4 technology elements that are going to drive overall disruption in consumption. The first, I think, is going to be 5G. 5G, I don't know how many of you right now, if you open up the internet connectivity that you are on, I'm assuming this hotel Wi-Fi, and do a speed test, you'll probably get to 100 Mbps speed. 5G would go up to about a gig, right? 800 Mbps to a gig. So it's way faster, super low latency. It's already used by 1 billion people in the world. By 2027, 3/4 of the planet will be on 5G. And that's going to really disrupt how consumption of any kind, whether it's on devices, whether it's on IoT, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's entertainment, it's all going to change, right? The second element that I think is going to be a big driver is AI. And I think AI, I could go on, I don't want to steal the whole time.
We talked a lot about it today, so yeah, that's fine.
So AI is a big driver. And the third one, which I'm a believer on, is how the metaverse is going to transform consumption experiences, right? The problem today is it's not democratized. It requires an AR headset, which is extremely expensive, cumbersome, bulky to use. But imagine a world where you could be literally sitting in this audience in a full 3D experience on a browser of your mobile device. And I think for that to happen, the compute needs to move to the back end. Everything's going to triple and quadruple in terms of compute and speed. But I think it's going to disrupt the way we consume and connect with experiences, right? And I think the last piece, if I could add, is commerce. I think commerce is going to pivot in a very big way to video-based experiences and social-based experiences. So today, in the next 3 to 4 years, almost 25% of all commerce that we see happening electronically will be socially driven and will be influencer-led. And so those are the 4 or 5 things that I think.
Can you add to those?
Well, I know I'm doing something right because everything that he said I agree with. No, but to add to that, I think, look, people want to communicate with each other at the base of it, right? And these are tools which will enable that to happen. So for instance, 5G and the metaverse will enable people to live their best versions of themselves. And if you poll Gen Z audiences, a lot of people prefer living in that environment, which is what they perceive to be the best version of themselves in the virtual world. So what is happening, right? And then gaming is the gateway to that metaverse. So essentially what you're doing is you're just enabling them to communicate, and eventually, commerce also comes in there, and that's the overall evolution. The other thing which he spoke about is AI, right? I know people talk about AI as well as data, right? That's been a big theme over the course of the day today. But if you really look at it deeply, data itself, like the duopoly of Facebook and Google, is breaking, because other than the larger government regulations. What's happened is that fissure has allowed a lot of niches to form. If I can, I'm rather at the risk of being a little esoteric, if I can find a way of increasing a conversion of a business through marketing technologies from 1% conversion, someone opens an email at 1% and then I buy something, versus 2%. It changes the business's outcome. And if you can, I don't know how many people are up to date, I've been following ChatGPT, you can try to automate that process in as human a way possible to then eventually lead to better outcomes and monetization for that business. And we love businesses which make other people money, right? Yeah. It's as simple as that. So we try to break it down to the most basic elements.
Let's have a quick question from the audience. Gentleman at the back, I can just see a hand. It's probably going to be the only one, but make it a goodie, no pressure.
As far as media tech is concerned, I mean, any one of you can answer it. What do you think it means for the tradition, what was thought to be traditional media like newspapers and magazines?
Yeah, I think I'll take a stab at it. So I think it is a journey of transformation. I'm a big believer that television is not dead. I know a lot of my friends love to say that and it sounds really cool. But at least when I look at the country that I come from, we're 1.5 billion people, 180 million television sets, 50% of which Mark has never seen in probably a long time, cathode ray tubes, right? And so when you think about it, television is always going to be an aspirational item in a developing country, right? However, the mechanism of broadcast is going to get totally disrupted, and we are seeing that happening. So, satellite-based broadcast is dead, will die eventually, if not dead today, and it will move to IP-based systems. It will move to connectionless experiences across devices. And I think for a television company, whether you're in news, entertainment, or sport, you've got to be able to adapt to that new world. But I'm a firm believer that TV is here to stay. So I mean, that's personal. And I think that's at least in developing markets. If it's print, I'm not that hopeful because I think print is getting far more disrupted much more quickly. To go online and build your own ad tech platform and monetize the way we do is really hard because content companies are traditional and their strength is content. Their strength is not technology. So I always tell my friends in that part of the world that play on your strengths, which is content, and start thinking about how you create differentiated experiences that people will pay for, whether you're, again, in entertainment or sports or in news, which means far deeper opinion and analysis rather than just breaking news, which is a commodity. So I think those are the two areas that I see as opportunities for traditional business.
50-50. Like some people will thrive, some people will die out because, at the end of the day, we may shout from the top of our voices, and I've spoken to large media owners, people have legacy issues. If you're making money from a certain source, and it's like the frog boiling in the water, right? And that's what happens. And just the other thing is media tech is so vast that these guys pick up a narrow niche of that also, and they can truly build it into something which will eventually disrupt their existing business. But it takes kahunas to do that, basically. So yeah.
One small example is the city that we're living in. I don't know how many of you are aware, but billboards in this end of the world are really big. They're almost, in terms of market size, if I look at the size of TV or digital in India versus billboards is not even 2% of that market, right, combined. Whereas in UAE, in Dubai, it's over 10% when I just look at the ADX. And so what I've seen when I talk to guys here, what they're doing really well is traditional billboards have moved to programmatic buying where displays are often being changed. And that's an example of an offline business that's actually driving transformation quite nicely. For a decent share of revenue in this country, right? So just an example.
Gentlemen, you were brilliant. Big round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
It's an honor.
Thank you.